As Israelis wondered at the successes their air force displayed in the skies over Iran, the grinding reality of the situation in Gaza and the IDF's ongoing struggles there have come back into public focus. Counterinsurgency campaigns are often long, grueling, and difficult to succeed in. So much so that there's a misconception that they are impossible to win.
So historically speaking, most insurgencies go to the counterinsurgent rather than the insurgent, historically speaking. That's, if you look at I'm a trained political scientist, so we like our data sets, if you go for the last couple hundred years.
This includes numerous insurgencies launched against European colonial powers that were crushed with overwhelming force. The British fight against the Mau Mau in Kenya is one such example.
Now, here's a catch with that data set. It's weighted primarily towards 19th century insurgencies.
The ratio of insurgent victories to defeats flips when examining the period from World War II to the modern day, Cohen says. Afghanistan is just the latest US example. The advancement of modern weaponry and developments in information technology go a long way to explaining this reversal. Governments fighting counterinsurgencies benefit from blocking their public's access to information from the battlefield, which can bleed support as casualties and civilian deaths mount, a much harder task today than 100 years ago.
The fact that Vietnam was one of the first wars that was televised in pretty stark detail. So it was brought into people's living rooms on every evening news, right? And that in turn had domestic political consequences for the United States. And it ultimately forces the United States to choose that says costs are simply just not worth it.
In recent decades, Western militaries have gravitated towards a hearts and minds focused counterinsurgency doctrine, viewing this as more effective and morally justifiable.
You control the population. You then give a series of, and then you win over the people who are on the fence through economic aid, through political reforms, through information operations. The population, the insurgency then loses its connection to the population. It loses its base of support. The insurgency withers and dies.
Israel generally does not take this approach. It favors an attritional, enemy-focused strategy rather than the population-focused doctrine of NATO, killing the enemy as the goal, even when they are hidden among a civilian population.
It's all about time-sensitive targets and detecting them in time, and then closing the sensor-to-shooter loop so that the targets are hit as soon as possible.
Reducing the guerrillas' ability to hit, run, and hide among civilians, or the urban wasteland. While there is some acknowledgement of hearts and minds in the IDF, it is not a strategy in itself.
In the West Bank, we have seen the IDF promote for many years the idea of separating combatants from non-combatants and trying to keep the operations as targeted as possible based on the idea that non-combatants should be encouraged to have a prosperous life, and the idea is that the more economic advantages they have in the West Bank, the less prone they'll be to the siren call of the jihadist.
And in Gaza, where the government and military were Hamas, this approach was less relevant, Lapine says. Destroying Hamas's capabilities took priority.
There's a fundamental assumption that the enemy that Israel is combating is ideologically irreconcilable. In other words, there's not going to be a moment where Hamas, accepts Israel's existence ideologically from its religious Islamist ideology, its jihadist ideology, and so that might make this different from other counterinsurgencies because the goal here is a kind of long-term attrition of capabilities until the ideology loses traction amongst the civilians.
But underlying Western doctrine is the belief that no matter how many insurgents you kill, more will be recruited. So instead, the emphasis is placed on separating the insurgent from the population, from whom it is sustained. Following the switch of IDF Chief of Staff from Herzl Levy to Eyal Zamir, the Israeli military has altered strategy, with seizing and holding territory central to this.
The next natural phase of any counterinsurgency, if that's what we're calling this campaign, is to set up an alternative administration, a civilian administration. That cannot happen until the IDF captures and holds territory.
Under NATO doctrine, key to winning a counterinsurgency is avoiding actions which turn the population against you, boosting support for the enemy. Cohen views the Israeli decision to block or limit food entering Gaza as a mistake, eroding support for Israel internationally and making civilians more hostile to Israel.
From a strategic perspective, it's just a self-inflicted wound. You can make a really convincing case, both from a long-term strategies perspective, but also from a tactical perspective of like, what I want to do is make, you can think of a variety of different ways to do this, of like, you develop safe zones and you provide food for that safe zone. And, by the way, part of the condition of you providing food for that safe zone is like, you are going to be using it as a way to collect human intelligence.
The entry of the Gazan Humanitarian Foundation, a US-Israeli-linked operation distributing food in South Gaza, appears to be an effort by Israel to ease aid concerns while preventing Hamas from seizing supplies. Like Israel, Western nations have a mixed record on success in combat against insurgents, leaving no easy routes to success in Gaza.